Hello, everyone. My name is Lelia from One More Page Books. If you are watching this and you're not familiar with us, we are an independent bookstore in Arlington, Virginia, so just outside DC, in the border of Arlington and Falls Church. And I'm so happy to be here with these amazing authors talking about their books. And we have, if you're not familiar, we do have a teen book festival called NoVa that we've done in past years. We started it in, oh boy, this is funny, like my notes, a long time ago, 2014, I think. So this year, we didn't really feel like we could do an in-person event when we were planning it originally. We weren't really sure. So we're doing a sort of homecoming where we're having some fantastic authors who have been to festivals in the past and who have new books to talk about now with us. And so I'm just really excited to be here with you all. And thank you so much for writing cool books and for spending time with us here in a virtual space. We have, if you know anybody watching, we have one event every night this week. So Monday through Friday, and Friday will be our keynote. It's at 6 o'clock every night. You can see it on our website, which is probably how you got here. So you probably know all this information, but just in case. Let's see. Yes, it was 2014. I just saw it in my notes, guys. Good note. Cross-checked. Yes, we may have some special guests during the panel. Animal and humans. All right. So, actually, fun fact. Exactly 2 years ago today was supposed to be NoVa Teen 2020. I guess that's not a fun fact. It's really a sad fact. I'm sorry. But it is cool that it's on Pi Day. So glad we can all be here and doing a different vibe. So I also want to thank all of our partners who have helped make NoVa Teen happen every year past, well, not every year, but in past years and this year. George Mason University's Vault for the Book, Fairfax County Public Library, Loudoun County Public Library, Alexandria Library, and Friends of the Beatley Central Library, and Arlington Public Library. So the moral of the story here is that libraries are amazing. Please support your local libraries, and shout out to all the librarians who are doing amazing work and dealing with so much stuff right now. So thank you to all of them, and thank you to everyone that makes NoVa Teen happen. So also, just a quick note, we're going to have signed copies available for all of the authors with most of them are signed book plates because, obviously we're not together in person, but if you want to order those, you can do so on our website. And that's onemorepage.books.com. They're on the NoVa Teen website as well. And at some point, I'll put up the fancy little banner that comes up at the bottom. So get ready for that. So yeah, now that I've talked to you for 3 minutes, let me I'm going to introduce the authors, and I'm sorry that I'm not going to do it in the correct clockwise manner because I can never remember which direction you're seeing this. So we have Miranda Kenneally, who I just want to say has a special place in my heart because Miranda, you were one of our first YA events we did at the store, and for Catching Jordan all those years ago. And this year we're talking about The Pickup, which is your first book in dual point of view, I think, that you've written. Okay. Anyway, sorry. The theme of the panel is multiple points of view. I was supposed to mention that at some point. I'm sorry, everyone. Ta-da. All right. And then also with us is Anna Marie McLemore, the author of Lake Lore, which just came out and is amazing. I'm listening to it on audiobook. So good. And also dual point of view, two main characters. Lisa Maxwell here on the bottom level. Lisa, I'm going to try not to spoil anything about your book because The Serpent's Curse is book 3 and it just came out in paperback. But you can order paperback or hardcover, anyone. Sorry. So again, I'm going to try to talk about it delicately without saying anything. So if I do spoil anything from the first 2 books, just, and then I'll do that. Retrack. Yes, The Last Magician is book 1. The Devil's Thief is book 2. Serpent's Curse is number 3. And number 4 is upcoming. Oh, wait, which just has a cover. This was way longer than my intros were going to be. I'm so sorry, everyone. Next, we have Eric Smith. And your book is You Can Go Your Own Way, which always gets the song stuck in my head, which I love and also brings out so many emotions. I know, exactly. I'm like, oh, it's so good. So thank you so much, Eric. Jodi Meadows is also with us here to talk about Night Render, which, yes, it's epic. And I think also we'll have an upcoming sequel. Yes, excellent. So first in the series, everything is first in the series except for Lisa. So again, I will try my best not to spoil anything. All right, so since we're talking about points of view and writing from different points of view, I thought if you guys don't mind sharing the first, just sort of give us a brief introduction to the characters that we're seeing, your points of view, in the story. Lisa, you don't have to do all of them because yours has very many points of view.
Yeah.
But if you all don't mind just doing a quick sort of introduction to your characters, that'd be great. Miranda, you're next to me, so I'm gonna say let's start with you. Sorry, I realize it's a big panel.
You said me, Miranda?
Yes,
or
please.
did you say Anna? Okay, sorry. Thanks again for having me. It's good to see everybody. I haven't seen any of you guys, I think, in person in so long, so it's good to see you. I think Eric was one of the last people I saw before COVID started, actually. So it's good to see him again. So my first, or this is my first, book where I've written in 2 points of view, and it is about 2 kids who in Chicago, who meet in a ride share, like in an Uber, and spend the weekend at Lollapalooza together in Chicago. And it's from the point of TJ and Mary, who have never met before. The reason I think I put it in dual point of view is because I am writing about 2 kids who have never met each other, and they are meeting in a ride share, which could be kind of dangerous. So I thought it was pretty critical to make sure that both the guy and the girl and what they're feeling was coming across to the reader, and lots of communication. So that was one of the main reasons I put it into dual point of view. So that's it for me. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Anna Marie, do you want to tell us about your 2 characters?
Sure. So thank you for having me. I'm also thrilled to be here today. So Lakelore is a dual point of view book. I'll start a little bit with what it's about. Lakelore is about trans and non-binary identity, about neurodivergence, and about an enchanted world under a lake that starts coming above the surface, threatening to bring everyone's secrets to the surface along with it. So I have 2 point of view characters. You'll see them on the cover of the book. I am beyond thrilled that there are like two brown non-binary boys on the cover of this book. I never thought I would have that on the cover of the book. I'm absolutely thrilled. So you have these 2 characters, Bastian and Laure. Both use they them pronouns. Both are neurodivergent, but they have very different experiences of both of these things. They have very different gender identities despite using the same pronouns, and their brains work differently than what is considered the norm. But their brains also work very differently from each other. Bastian is more transmasculine and is starting testosterone injections at the beginning of Lakelore. Bastian also has ADHD and has known for a while that they have ADHD, and is sort of in the evolving process of how do I live with my own brain, and how does that interact with my cultural identity, and how does that interact with my gender identity, especially as I'm starting to live more in the world as who I am in relation to gender identity. So Laure is non-binary in more of a gender fluid way, has more of a range in how they present and how they feel. There's discussion in the book about them talking about like gender forecasts, about how like they wish they could sort of like give everybody the heads up around them about like this is what my gender is going to be, just so no one is alarmed about the fact that I like wore a dress yesterday and I will be in a suit today. So Laure is also kind of in that process of how does my brain interact with my gender identity. Specifically, Laure is dyslexic. But Laure has also just moved to the town that Bastian lives in, and the town that Bastian has lived in for a while. So Bastian has their life here, and Laure is more like, okay, I just moved here. I did this really bad thing at my previous school, and none of my life before exists anymore. I'm not going to talk about being dyslexic. I'm not going to talk about what my life was like before. I'm going to be somebody else when I get here. So these 2 characters have a lot in common, but are also approaching their lives and their identities, and the sort of out of control magic that's starting to happen with alegrías and glitter bubbles and water coming above the surface everywhere in very different ways.
The visuals are it really is so amazing to read, just imagining all those things. And I love the gender forecast scene. I think that was such an amazing idea and a great conversation between the 2 of them. So thank you. Jodi, can you tell us a little bit about your characters? And I mean, they're all great, but Night Render, I mean, is so just like that. Just the cover alone is just great.
Thank you. Hi, I am also glad to be here. So my book has 3 points of view. The first one is Night Render. She is an immortal champion who goes to sleep between times that she is summoned, and her purpose, her sole purpose, is to kill the Rancor, the monsters that come from another world to try to take over and do what scary, awful monsters do to the world. And that is her driving purpose to do that. She's socially incompetent. And she doesn't really remember what happened the last time she was awake, which is a problem for her right now. The other 2 characters, there are 3 kingdoms in this book, and they are constantly at war with one another. I wanted to make sure that I represented at least 2 of the kingdoms, and so I added a couple of, and humans also. So I added a couple of other characters, Rune, who is from one kingdom, and Han, who is a princess from a different kingdom. They hate each other, they're enemies, and they're going to get married for peace because they hate the third kingdom more. Rune is sort of a cinnamon roll. He really wants to do the right thing. He wants to be good. Meanwhile, Han is very ambitious. She's got goals, and her main goal is to bring peace to the world her way, no matter what. And the best way to do that is to become queen of everything. So yeah, her motivations are very straightforward, and the way that she goes about getting things done also very straightforward, and maybe not like what everybody would prefer, but she thinks she can be good at it.
That's one of the things I think was so like immediate about your book is you already see the differences between the points of view and their motivations and their goals. So it's just already just like, wow, how are they going to work? Interesting. Which sort of segues a little bit to Eric's, where you do have 2 characters who are in opposition at the beginning. Do you want to tell us about your 2 characters?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's their opposition is we used to be friends. Now we're kind of getting along. Now to lovers sort of rom-com, that sort of awkward little arc there. But yeah, and you can go your own way. We meet Adam and Whitney. Adam is a teen boy who's running his dead father's failing pinball arcade as a way to sort of hold on to him as a result of the loss there. And Whitney is a teenager who is running her father's social media for his chain of esports cafes. Both of them are just sort of trying to hold on to their families in ways that aren't necessarily terribly healthy. I'm always very interested in stories about teenagers who feel like they have to make everyone else proud before taking care of themselves and aren't quite aware of the fact that they deserve to be proud of their own accomplishments, not necessarily what other people want. So both of them are doing the same thing. Both kind of have no idea. Both kind of hate each other. And then they don't. And yeah, thanks for having me today. This is really lovely. And I apologize for any toddlers who burst in here. This is supposedly the one safe room where I can do anything, but that's going to be tested, I think.
I mean, listen, it's a panel with a rideshare meetup and a fantasy world and the underside of a lake thing is coming up. There's so much chaos here. I think that any more chaos is certainly welcome. So I love it. Let's just lean into it. Lisa, that brings us to you and your different points of view in your books, plural.
Yeah. So first of all, it's amazing to be here. Like I remember planning the very first Nova Teen like so many years ago. So it's so great. It's still going and it's exciting to be here. So I'm going to keep this short and snappy. I'm not going to do all the point of views because I think in the Serpent's Curse 8 or 9, maybe, but one of those is 2 different time periods of the same characters. So yeah, so I'm not going to do all those. So the easiest way to understand this is talking about The Last Magician, right? Which is about a time traveling thief who has to go back to old New York to stop a magician from destroying a book that can save magic because all the magical immigrants are stuck inside the brink If they leave the brink, which is like surrounding Manhattan, they get zapped, and the evil order is the one keeping them there. So in the first book, everybody wants the book, right? The Ars Arcana, the Book of Mysteries. So there's the main character is Esta Filosic. She's the time traveling thief. She's like tough as nails and she can see in bullet time. And she spent her whole life trying to be good enough to be part of the team she was brought up with. And she is going after Hart Darrigan, who is a literal stage magician who's hiding his magic with stage magic. So it's totally enemies to lovers with angry kissing in the first couple books, and then the kissing gets less angry by the third and fourth books. And then two other main characters that you have to know are Viola Vaccarelli. She is the Italian assassin. She likes to throw knives. She's really good at it. She would stab pretty much anyone for any reason. And then Zhang Yu Li is, he's a Chinese immigrant who's stuck in the country and also stuck behind the brink, and he can disappear. So Viola can basically hit anybody with this knife and kill them with one swipe, among other things that are revealed in book one. And Zhang Yu, he can kind of bend light around him to disappear. So basically they all want the book. They all want to destroy the order. And for the first couple books, they're just all working against each other to do it. So.
Yeah, it's your book is, or your series, I should say, is really just like the definition of epic in its scope.
Yeah.
Kudos to you for writing it. It's
done.
A lot. Yeah. Yeah, okay, I was gonna say, yeah, you're like done, right? Yeah.
Like literally today, I think, is the drop date for the fourth book.
Oh my gosh.
So, yeah.
Wow.
It's done.
Congratulations. Well, so some of you wrote in first person, so we're really in the characters' heads, and some of you are in third persons, but it's usually pretty close third. So, you know, with those perspectives, we do sort of get as readers a pretty good sense of who the characters are, at least from how they view themselves. I love multiple points of view. This is why I'm so glad I got this panel, because I read for characters, and so I think that's one of the things I really enjoy about seeing the different points of view. Is there's things that you learn about characters that you wouldn't learn from themselves, that, you know, they wouldn't necessarily say about themselves. So, you know, we don't always see ourselves clearly. So I think it's really interesting to sort of get to see them from an outside point of view as well. Is there anything that you can think of that comes to mind about one of your main characters that we only learn from seeing them through the other characters or one of the other characters' eyes? I'll start. Now I don't want to do the same pattern again. I don't know. Anne-Marie, is there anything that you can think of between Bastien and Laure?
Sure. I was just thinking of a moment related to some of the art that Bastien makes. For anyone who doesn't know, alebrijes, which figure heavily in Lake Lore, are a type of Mexican art form that dates back to Pedro Linares around 1930 in Mexico City, that involves bringing together different elements of different animals. A couple that you'll see in Lake Lore is like a deer with wings or a hummingbird with like a filmy fish's tail. And they're often brightly colored, and they're these sort of just dream animals that are their own art form. And with the help of their older brother, Antonio, Bastien learns to make these as a little kid who's like learning that they have ADHD and trying to figure out how to deal with stuff. And Antonio, like, bless him, is like a Mexican American cis guy who's like, okay, I gotta help this kid because otherwise machismo's gonna get this like my little trans boy brother, and starts talking with them about, okay, this is what I do. Like, I make these alebrijes, like I do this wire and paper mache and paint. And I make these animals as part of a way to give my feelings space when it feels like there's not enough room for them in my heart, in my brain, in my life. Like, this is part of how I give some of them space, and how I can sometimes like let some of them go, at least for the time being. So this is something that Bastien really gets into growing up. And part of what makes them like show up is like giant alebrijes in the world under the lake. And this is part of how Bastien like interacts with their own neurodivergence and with their own traditions and cultures at the same time. But through the whole time of doing this, Bastien is sort of thinking like, this is just what I do. This is what I have to do with my brain. And like, when I look around and there's alebrijes everywhere, like, oh, that I've had a lot of feelings lately. And Laure says to Bastien, like, yo, wow, like, look at all that, you're an artist. And Sebastian has never thought of himself that way, like ever. Has just thought, this is what I do to deal with my feelings, and has never really looked at the fact that like that you are participating in this art form, you are participating in this cultural art tradition, and you're really good at it. Like, it's a little terrifying when they come to life and they're gigantic and they're suddenly like on your street unexpectedly, but they're beautiful. And this is something that's a talent of yours. So sometimes having someone say this is something beautiful that you do. And I think especially whatever kind of art we create, like whether we're talking about stories, whether we're talking about visual art, music, any kind of art, like sometimes we don't realize that that is worth giving space and that is worth valuing until someone says like, you are an artist.
That's such a great example. I thought that was one of the things too, that being in Bastian's head, really the way that you see their life is so different than when you're seeing it. I mean, that counts for both of them, but that specifically, and that's a great point about artists not always necessarily seeing that their art is art. You know, like it's just a thing that they do. That goes for writers too. Y'all are amazing artists. Miranda, one of your characters, TJ, is also an artist, and I think it was cool being in his head because there was a word it was a color. I think he used like chartreuse or something, and I was like, whoa, yeah, he's definitely an artist. But is there anything that comes to mind for you between Mary and TJ that we sort of get a better sense or understanding of them through the other's eyes?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to think about it from two different perspectives. First from the story perspective, but also from the craft of writing. I think one thing that's, with my characters, especially, I think there are things like deep down they know that they're not willing to admit to themselves. Like, for instance, my main girl character, Mary, she's being, for several years, her mother has been verbally abusing her and has been horrible to her in a lot of different ways. And Mary, makes excuses for it. But I think deep down, she knows that, she is being abused. And, TJ, it takes him, I think, saying, hey, straight up, everything you're describing to me sounds like abuse. And it sort of helps him or helps her, come to the realization like, hey, maybe I need to stand up for myself. So maybe it's like that validation, I think is really important for her. But the same thing with TJ, he also is, I was thinking the same thing a minute ago about the art. He's really interested in art, but he's not going to go to school for it because he doesn't think like that's something I can do. But it takes Mary saying to him, hey, you should actually think about this. You are really talented. And again, deep down, I think he really wanted that. And he was really thinking about it, but he needed that validation from, another person to know, oh, maybe this is something I can actually consider. So I think from a dual point of view, it's really helpful to be able to get that, that secondary validation. Sorry, there's an evil Amazon truck going by outside my house, you guys. I'm sorry.
They're trying to crash the panel.
For the noise. But from a craft point of view, I think one thing that's, again, this is the, one of the first, dual point of views I've ever done in my life. And, when you're writing from, just, one point of view, you have to, get all these deep things about other characters across, like maybe that they're hiding, but you have to get it across through their actions or things they say. And that's that creates tension in and of itself. But with dual point of view, there are no secrets, but, especially in a romance. So I found that challenging, like to keep the tension going when pretty much everything's on the table.
You're like, I love it. You're giving a teaser for one of my later questions, Miranda. So thank you for that. That's perfect.
Just telling the whole book here.
No, that's great. No, thank you. Yeah, you're especially with Mary's relationship with her mother. I think you're right that it's as a reader, you don't really understand fully as she's describing it because I mean, it's not even an unreliable narrator thing. It's sort of is more like she really just doesn't see that as clearly in her life. But like you said, the external, someone from the outside telling you, I think really does make a difference.
Yeah.
Jodi, your characters, I think it's because there's the difference in what human versus non-human. I really think that it especially sort of highlights the things that we learn about the other from seeing them through one point of view. Is there anything that comes to mind for you specifically about yours that we learn from an outsider perspective?
Yes, that is one of the things that I was just thinking about, actually, was Night Ranger is such an alien, inhuman kind of person, very socially inept, and just doesn't connect with people very well. But Rune really wants to be her friend, desperately wants to be her friend. He thinks that she's so cool. And he really tries to see the humanity in her and like the vulnerability in her that she doesn't want anybody else to see. And he's really making an attempt to see that. And I think even more than her own point of view, the way that he sees her humanizes her. He's a little bit scared of her because, she's super strong and has a cool sword, but he also really wants her to feel welcome. And so he's just automatically more sympathetic and working harder to see her as a person, not just a weapon. And the other thing I was thinking about, so this book is told in third person, and one of the reasons that I chose third person was because the characters spend a lot of time apart too. In the beginning, Rune and Han are in the same scene, but they separate very quickly. And there's a scene early on where Han is running from her life because a monster is chasing her, and she just kind of tunnel vision, like while she's running. And I wanted to show that she was being kind of hurted by the monster that is after her, that she misses this magical barrier and all of these hints that she shouldn't have gone through this place. And that's how she ends up it's called a malsite. It's where like a pocket of reality where things are different. So for her, time is running a lot faster. But that's much easier to do if I can just say it in third person as a narrator.
Yeah, I think yours definitely needed to be in third person. But it does still feel like we really get a good sense of the characters sort of by being that close in their heads. Mm-hmm. And especially Rune, to be fair, that could just be because I like Rune because he's, like you said, sort of a cinnamon roll. But yes, that's the close third versus first I think is an interesting sort of seeing the contemporary versus fantasy. Because sometimes when you're in a fantasy world, you really need to be able to just narrate some stuff.
That is for sure.
Such a memorable group of characters. So we'll keep going with fantasy. Lisa, is there anything, your characters are challenging because some of them really do keep their secrets. It's a little more complicated in terms of.
Yeah, it's like what Miranda was saying, like there are no secrets. So when you're in that many characters' heads, including the villains, like finding a way to narrate that to keep the twists from being telescoped too early is a challenge. But I think it's important because, I mean, like you said, with the fantasy world, when I started The Last Magician, it was only supposed to be 2 point of views. It was just supposed to be Hart and Esta, but like I couldn't get the world building and all the backstory through them without them being like, and let me tell you about this 100-year period of what happened. So by having these other characters, I could like show the world. And so by having them, what I get is like none of the characters understand themselves, which is pretty common, I think, for any sort of multiple point of view, right? Like you don't see yourself clearly and other people can, but what I get by having so many different point of view characters is it's like they're called mages, right? The magical characters who are stuck and oppressed. and they all react very differently to it. And it allows me to really play with these kind of different ways of existing in a world that wants to kill you, right? And some react better than others. Some turn into villains, some turn into heroes, some just kiss each other angrily. Happens. Yeah, but the hard thing is there's no secrets. So in every book, I've tried to put some kind of a big twist in it that you don't see coming, but like you're in everyone's head, like at some point.
There are indeed some twists,
yeah,
to be had.
Yeah.
Eric, I think yours is especially an interesting dynamic because I'll wait to hear what your answer is. But I was going to say I think seeing the characters, especially talking about their past, really gives you a different perspective to hear both sides. So did you have anything that came to mind immediately about sort of how that multidimensional, how the reader is learning more about a character from the other's point of view?
Yeah, and that was exactly it. You know, when I set up to have them going back and forth and shifting POV like that, I wanted you to hear Adam talking about how much he can't stand her, and then in the next paragraph, him talking about, oh my God, I miss my friend. I wish I knew what had happened. Same thing with Whitney, talking about how much she hates working for her dad, but then in the next paragraph, hearing about how much she loves it and how she has to throw everything she got at it. My favorite thing about that sort of shifting point of view with that is that, like, you get to have that sort of unreliable narration that happens from time to time where you realize that everything would be okay if people just talk to one another. And I feel like that's my favorite hiccup in a lot of YA contemporary. It's like everything would be fine if you just sat down and talked about your feelings, but none of us do that. And it's a lot of fun to explore that and show that it would be a lot easier, but then it's not as fun.
I totally agree. Especially, I love that as a plot, number one, and number two, especially as a teenager, like the idea of just sitting down and talking about your feelings is even arguably more horrifying than as an adult. But yeah, I loved getting to see, and maybe I was a little bit of a more, I guess I'm a reader who never sees anything coming, so it's really easy to like pull. So like I didn't realize, maybe I didn't read the back of the book either, that they had been friends before, and so when that realization happens, I was like, what? So great work, Eric. Great work. Really lots of feelings to be had there. So we've already touched on this a little bit, but I'm curious about how it works from an intentional sort of craft point of view when you know that there's information that you need to have either given to the reader or given to one character but not the other, or like how do you decide when to reveal things to either the reader or to a character? Because I think it's really interesting to see how that can work in withholding that from, but both. Sometimes the characters know something that the reader doesn't. Sometimes one character knows and the other doesn't. Is there any example that you can share without spoiling anything? Or is there just like a sort of an overall philosophy that you have about how to balance that and what tools to use or what pace to use for delivering information like that, whether it's plot based or sort of character development based? If anyone knows off the top of their heads, they can go first. Jodi.
Yes. So I'm conflicted about like mentioning exactly what it is. It's in the flap copy of the book, but generally I would have considered it a spoiler. So I don't know. But it is the secret about what happened the last time Nightrender was summoned. And she does not remember. She doesn't know why she doesn't remember. She just doesn't. It's very freaky for her. But Ruin knows, and Han knows. Now, Han doesn't really have a reason to think about it. She's not present with Nightrender for most of the story in the beginning. But Ruin is. And he's very deliberately talking around it because he doesn't want to tell her in case it makes her mad. Because it was a very bad thing. And like, that's kind of what you get through about halfway through the book. And then I like a good midpoint. I like something to turn emotionally that changes the way that the characters view themselves, their situation, and what is going on in their world. So I tried very hard to move this revelation for Nightrender to the middle of the book. And to have that, to give her time to deal with it, first of all, because it's a pretty big revelation. And then to have that inform her decisions for how she's going to move forward before we get into the climax. So yeah, that's, I'm not generally like that mechanical about it, but for a midpoint turn, I generally am. And also, especially if it's a duology, this is the second duology I've written, this is how I end up with cliffhangers. I'm sorry.
A gift and a curse, the cliffhanger ending of a book one. But it's not, when it's a duology, it's not as, it's like, all right, you just got one more.
Midpoint.
You'll be fine. Exactly.
It's like all over again.
But yeah, I loved getting to see who knows what about whom and what I do or don't know in Nightrender. Did anyone else have immediate thoughts about reveals?
I do something really similar, right? Like it's kind of, I figure out what the twist is, because like an idiot, I made a ridiculously good twist in the first book and then realized, oh, there are more of those. Now I have to come up with more twists that will not disappoint people. So that was dumb. So I try to figure out like what that is. And then you have to figure out, how do you hide it so it's reasonable? Because it can't just be that they're avoiding, like there has to be a reason why like the information misses them. And that's how you decide who knows what and where stuff's coming. But I found, and I don't know about the rest of you, but I found like there's certain chapters that just won't write themselves. And then you realize, oh, I'm in the wrong person's head. Like, oh, if I just switch this, then all of these, I've been trying for like 3 days to write this chapter. And all I had to do was like get in the other person in the conversation's head. And suddenly everything makes it just, it works. I don't know. It's like part of that like flow of writing that just, I don't think I'm smart enough to figure it out. It just figures itself out, I guess.
No, I mean, from someone who generally only writes in first person, I mean, that's a good trick for first person too, Lisa, is if you're stuck, you can write from the point of view of another person in the scene to get their perspective, and maybe that can open up, something for your narrator, to keep writing. But going back to what Jodi said about, mechanics, I mean, I have this book around here. It's called like 20 Master Plots, and it basically has checklists for everything that, you have in a book. But from a character perspective of when to reveal things, from a mechanical point of view, I mean, early on in the book, in any book, the main character or the main characters needs to have something happen that throws their worldview into question. And how do they deal with that information internally? And that, is a big piece of a character development of a book. How do they deal with a new worldview? And, do they question it? Do they push back against it? Do they, and however they deal with it. But, as you move along in terms of creating the plot and, attaching the character development to it, for me, you definitely have to have more reveals like Lisa was talking about. You have to have a twist somewhere. In a contemporary YA, I think you have to have a crash and burn where, basically something to, everything, you crash and then you have to build back from that. How do you come out of that and end up with your conclusion? So I like to think a lot about the mechanics, but it's hard to do that naturally with a plot.
I love all these answers so much because I feel like mine's so lazy. Like whenever I'm trying to hold back information and like slowly give it to the characters and slowly give it to the readers, it's usually because of a best friend character. Like I always have like the main character's bestie who's keeping them grounded and pointing out their bad decisions and making them talk about their feelings. And you can go your own way. It's this character, Chris, who like literally has physical things that he uses to make people talk about their feelings. Like if you have a big feeling, you get a Swedish fish, you get a piece of candy, you eat the candy, you talk about your feelings, because that's something me and my friends did in high school because we were all cinnamon roll boys, and that's just, I don't know, that's like my reality as a person. Lots of my friends are responsible for keeping me grounded and pointing out poor decisions, and that's just what I end up putting in my books, the BFF.
Did you all really use Swedish fish?
We use Tootsie Rolls.
Oh my
we
God,
call
that's
them-
amazing, Eric. That was such a beautiful element to the story. I was like, wait, that's a great idea. I mean, being emotionally vulnerable is still scary, but at least then you have some candy.
Yeah. We called them Tootsie Roll meetings.
Oh, great idea. That's awesome. Anna Marie, what about you?
Oh, that's the best. I'm having feelings about your feelings, Candy. So thinking about information getting revealed, part of what ended up happening between these two characters in Lake Lore, and that I really ended up thinking about how much the way we reveal information is impacted by the fact that every single one of us is an imperfect being, even when we are trying to be 100% honest. So you have two characters who are trying to fix the fact that like all of this lake magic is coming above the surface and creating a lot of problems, especially for the two of them. And they're trying to solve it together. And each of them brings the bias of like, this is my fault. Each of them thinks that. So they get information, and by the time they're sharing it with each other, they've already decided this is the conclusion to be drawn, because it's gone through the lens of, this is my fault. This is something I need to fix. And because of that, they're trying to be completely honest with each other. By like partway through this book, they've built a certain amount of trust with each other, even though they haven't spoken to each other in 7 years. But even when they have built that trust, even when they think, okay, I'm going to give you the information I have, because we have these magic problems that we need to solve together. I'm going to tell you what I know, but I've already decided that certain information is not important and other information is important. And I've already decided that I'm responsible for certain things and that certain things are my fault. Then by the time I give you the information that we are going to make magic decisions based off of, it's already gone. It's already refracted, to use a water metaphor. Like, it's already gone through that prism. It's already something else, even though you're like, I'm hiding nothing from you. That stuff I don't want to talk about, it's really not relevant here. So even when you're trying, even when you don't want to hold something back, you can be. And that's not condemning any character that does that, because we all do that, even when we're trying not to. It can take some Swedish fish or Tootsie Rolls for us to actually get to like what's going on, even like as hard as we are trying.
It was so beautiful reading Lake Lore, because at first, and like they're so open with each other, and they really, like you said, are building this trust. But then you do see sort of like, as you're listening to the internal monologues of, I don't want to show them this thing about myself. And it's just so, it really like, I mean, I don't know, heartrending is like I feel like is a cliche way to express, but it really does make you feel for those characters, because it's easy to relate to, like being like, oh, I want to show you who I am, but not that part. So it's really, but like you said, in their circumstances, there's things that they can't keep hidden for various reasons. So, but they have such a wonderful dynamic.
Sorry, this was I was just saying, this is the book where I really like learned through the writing, because I think I knew this as a reader, but learned through the writing that the character who insists that they're telling you everything is the character who is telling you nothing. Like, even if they're like, I'm totally out there, I am an open book, like there is nothing I'm hiding, that's usually the character who may not even know how much they're hiding.
I never heard that. That's so seemingly accurate. Since we're talking about sort of how the characters are see themselves versus how they're being perceived, was there a character who was easier to get into their head than another? Was there anything you did sort of like to signal to yourself, like, okay, now I'm writing this point of view, like a different music, or how did you sort of get into the different mindsets and keep them separate from your magic author all-knowing hands? Lisa, do you want to start since you have 3 books in your series, so you've really got it down pat now?
I don't know if I have it down pat, but I don't know. They're all very different people, so I don't know if I just have multiple voices in my head or what. But like, I can't write the chapter unless I hear them, right? So the one that's easiest is Viola. She's angry and stabby and likes pasta and stuff. So like me. So super easy to get that one. But they all have like a cadence, or especially in the first draft of The Last Magician, I pulled out certain lines that they had that if I was having trouble, I could go back to those lines and be like, oh, this is their voice. And then like there are certain rules, like Jean Yu never uses a contraction. He's really, really formal, just to kind of differentiate him. And like Viola has some like what you would get if you're not a native English speaker, the kind of mangled, not mangled, that's the wrong word, but where things are twisted, especially with Italian, where you have like a double speak almost, when like negatives, right, or double. So those kind of come out in English. Yeah, I don't know. They're just all really different in my head. So it's not hard. It's like channeling different voices, and please don't lock me up. But that's, I don't know. That's.
No, now that it's interesting because I don't think I would have necessarily been able to tell you that like, for instance, John Yu never uses a contraction. But now that you've said that, I'm like, oh yeah.
Yeah, I
like,
wouldn't want to make it anything like overly stereotypical or strange, but they're little things that when I go through the editing, then I edit for their voices. So I go through like, especially Viola, because English isn't her first language, and Jean Yu, because he's kind of such an outsider in the country. And then like Hart has, like Hart would be more like as though, whereas Esther would be like, because Esther's from 2000 and something, right?
Oh, that's true.
So like her voice sounds much more modern, because she grew up in the 21st century and came back, whereas Hart is much more formal, and then some of the other characters the same way. So I don't know if that's a good answer, but I mean, that's just,
they just sound different. Like I said, you've got it down pat. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can quickly answer. My character TJ was very easy to write because he knew exactly what he wanted and what he was interested in. And then, but my character Mary was somewhat of a nightmare to write because she wasn't really being honest with herself, and she was so afraid of falling in love, but yet she kind of deep down wanted that too. So it was very difficult to write from her point of view. I think mostly because I'm a very logical person, and I don't like a lot of nonsense. And so, but sometimes it's hard. Like someone said earlier, you don't always see yourself clearly. And my character Mary did not see herself clearly at all, and it was very difficult to write. So quite different from my other female characters who know what they want and will go after it sort of single-mindedly and like try to get it. This was a very different book for me to write.
Yeah, and I can chime in really quick. I think for me in this one, I write a little bit of myself into all of my books. I feel like a lot of us sometimes do that. And with Whitney, she was definitely the easiest because a lot of her character arc is about, she's seeking affirmation from people in her life that aren't necessarily paying much attention to her. And she feels like if she does a really good job, she'll get praise and she'll get attention. And that's, I guess, unfortunately, kind of the family that I grew up in, like, you got good grades, you got lots of love. You got bad grades, that affection's getting held back a little bit. So I put a lot of that into her character from my own experience. And I don't know, that's probably why I became an author, because now I'm always doing homework and hoping people tell me I did a good job, But yeah, a lot of me went into her character, and that kind of made it a little easier to write.
Well, and you're also an editor, so you get to do telling people they did a great job. So you got both sides. Great work. Jodi or Anna Marie, do either of you have immediate thoughts on how you got into the heads of your characters?
So part of what I had to do with these two characters, I was writing from identities that I have, like from being Mexican American, being trans and non-binary, like having ADHD and dyslexia. So that was the good news, that I had come from those experiences. The bad news was that I had come from those experiences. So I had to separate out, especially with ADHD and dyslexia, with trans and non-binary identity, and with Mexican American traditions. I was already so familiar with the ways that these things are not monoliths, the ways that we are all different. But I hadn't thought as much about how to separate out ADHD and dyslexia, because they both live in my brain. And there's overlap. There's certainly overlap, as there are with a lot of neurodivergent experiences. But what of my own brain was I drawing on for, like, when I was thinking about Bastian and their ADHD? What was I drawing on when I was thinking about Laure and their dyslexia? And the more I got to learn about how are these things different, how do they have overlap, how are they in conversation, but also distinct like kinds of neurodivergence. As I learned that, I was also learning how these characters' gender identities like interacted with their own hearts and interacted with the rest of the world, how these characters have overlapping but also distinct experiences of their own cultural identities. So as I was learning their brains, I was also learning their hearts and how they see the world in very different ways. And that helped them sound different in my head, like as I was writing, and even as I was thinking about like how they might convey a certain experience, they just started to sound more and more different the more I got to know them.
It is really, I mean, and to be fair, I guess I have a different point of view because I listened to the audio where it's two different performers, but it was so cool to sort of see them both describing the ways that their brains worked. And like you said, so there's some overlap in how that affects their lives, but they both had very distinct experiences and very distinct personalities, and they were just both such amazing characters to get to know. So, Jodi, what about you in terms of, was there one character that was easier for you to get into the mindset of?
I don't think there was one specific character who was easiest. I feel like I had a little bit of an advantage because since the characters are separated for most of the story, or they're in like pairs, or like they're not always together, I could very easily just write whatever character I felt like writing that day. I do rate linearly, and I definitely tried to mostly stay in order and not get too far ahead with one character's storyline or different characters. But if I was really feeling Hannah's story and I really was feeling her voice that day, then I could just keep going because she's separate from Ruin and Nightrender. And a lot of times, especially in the beginning of the book, Ruin and Nightrender are together, going on an adventure to rescue Han. And so I was just able to swap between them. And when I didn't want to write the fight scene from Nightrender's point of view, I swapped over to Rune's. And then when I didn't want to describe the fight scene, I pushed him down a hole. Yeah,
the greatest tool in a writer's toolbox.
I know, and I'm so upset that I can't use that trick again, as I have bracket notes for insert fight scene here in book 2. And I also try to remember, like, Ken's narration is a little bit snarkier. She's got a little bit of a sense of humor in a kind of conceited, not always very nice kind of a way, but she definitely has some strong feelings that come across as a little bit darkly funny, maybe. Rune, I think, is probably the most like me. He's easier to write in that way. Like, he desperately wants to be a good person and do the right thing and try to figure out like what the moral thing is. And he's really struggling with all of that. So that's always really easy for me to get into. And then Nightrender, when I feel like, oh, I want to write something that sounds like really grand and like describe these things and also talk about like the backstory of the world, then she's the character to go to because she knows all of that stuff and she has such a different scale of experiences than any of the other characters. So that's one of the ways that I can kind of keep them different and their voices sounding different on the page too. So remember what drives them and what is this like dominant part of their personality that needs to come through in their narration?
I think I think you could definitely get away with just making it a bit where anytime you don't want to write a scene, you just drop Rune in a hole. I think that tell your editor I said that that's totally doable.
I will. Thank you.
Pass that along. Well, we've had so many. We're already so close to an hour here, so I'm going to do one more question, and I kind of want to ask how family plays a role in your characters' lives or lack thereof, because some of your characters have really um, on page relationships with family members that we really see in positive ways. Miranda, you've already talked a little bit about your character's relationship with her mom, although we don't see that as much at least in the first half but there's also siblings and step siblings for both viewers. And then like Jodi for Night Render, I think the concept of family is so interesting because of the like political implications with the kingdoms and power and sort of that fantasy setting instead. And I mean, and everyone else as well. I kind of want to eat up all our time, but does anyone want to speak to how the family relationships affect? And Anna Maria, you talked about Antonio, who is such an amazing presence for Bastian as well. So does anyone want to kick things off about talking about family or found family?
I can talk a little bit about that. There's both like queer and trans found family and like the family that you grow up with are really important in lake lore. The sense I think found family it happens like in a lot of the books that I write. Because I think it's important to us. It's one of the ways that we have our lifeblood as a community and in our identities. In lake lore also I was writing about parents that helped normalize things that you're often told are not normal. I have two sets of parents that are just like good with having like non-binary kids. And in Laura's case, their mom is dyslexic. So this is like Laura already has an example of like, okay, I know I'm not stupid being dyslexic because my mother is one of the smartest people that I know. So I already know this. And in Bastian's case, Bastian has like lesbian moms and has like the sense of queerness already written into community. So having parents that still have to learn things about you and still have to understand things about you, but who also have a reference point of we're already like we've already been in a place and lived our lives in a way that we understand that we're going to get told what's normal, and we're going to get told that normal is not us, and we don't want our families to think that. We want our families to be a place where identity is recognized and celebrated.
I love the parent relationships because of, like you said, how normalizing they are and how supportive they are sort of as units for each other, even when everything else sort of is uncertain. Jodi, do you have any as a sort of other end of the spectrum? Not to say that the parents aren't supportive, but
they're not. That's true. They're not. I so love stories where the parents are supportive and present and like real huge parts of the main characters' lives, and I never write those. But I love reading them. So Han's relationship with her parents, you don't really get a whole lot of that in the first book, but you can tell pretty quickly that it's not a great relationship, and that something has happened in her past, and she doesn't really want to talk about it or think about it, so she doesn't. But definitely her parents are at fault, and her mom particularly has really high expectations for her as far as being queen and being the best and being perfect. Rune, on the other hand, does have a little bit better of a relationship with his parents, but it's complicated by the fact that his older brother died, and his older brother was supposed to be king, and now Rune feels like the replacement, like the one who wasn't wanted, and he constantly has this feeling that his parents don't actually love him. They just are putting up with him because the line of succession is so important. So I think his parents do care about him more than he thinks they care about him, but he's a teenager. he doesn't feel like that. And then there's Nightrender, who does sort of not have parents. She was like built, but her parents are sort of the gods in this world, and they've been totally gone for as long as she's been awake. So she's never met them. She doesn't know them. She feels very loyal to them, and also very just totally disconnected from them. But like, she knows what they want her to do, and that's what she's going to do.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that highlights the sort of how not isolated, that's not the right word, but how different it is to be Nightrender. I guess a factor of that is just being not stuck in it and not being from this time necessarily, sort of going in and out, and not having a family group to tether you to any specific.
Right. Her closest family would probably be considered her soul shard, which is like a piece of her soul that was broken off, and that person is reincarnated over and over, and so that is the person she cares about. That is like her tie to humanity, and this is supposed to make her want to protect the whole world so that she can protect this one person also, sort of as an insurance policy, and in case her parents, maybe they don't trust her so much, just in case.
Always good to have an insurance policy.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess they're her family.
Yeah. Eric, the family dynamics in your book are so beautifully portrayed, but a little complex. And you touched a little bit on that already, but could you speak a little more to that and how it takes a role in your characters' journeys?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the family sort of drives everything that's going on with the characters, right? So like Adam's running that pinball arcade as a way to hold on to his father who's gone, and Whitney is doing work for her father in a way to get that attention that she craves. So family kind of drives everything, for better or worse. And the book is kind of about trying to push away from that, because that's not the best way to live for other people.
It's great trying to watch seeing the characters sort of struggle with that balance, and I think it's a really, like I said, it's important to understand that for even as adults. It's right. It's nice to look at that and be like, oh yeah, maybe it's not always a great idea to tie your entire identity to what you perceive as your family's legacy and things like that. But it's, like I said, it's so well written, and I feel like I'm making your book sound more dark than it is. Like it's such a funny, happy book, guys. You should all read it. And or if you like dark, intense books, then you should still read it. Speaking of intense, Lisa, I think why don't you just what would you say about your books and family?
So actually, I really like this question because The Serpent's Curse really deals with this. I think all the books are about found family because I think everybody wants, what Esta wants most of all is a family. That's why she does what she does. She wants approval, but there are two characters who actually have families. So Viola, like her mother and her brother is like the gangster Paul Kelly, right? And they both, and then so Hart, he also has a father and a mother that he has to deal with things he's done in the past that have affected his family. So in the third book, both of them have to come face to face with that. Hart runs into his dad in San Francisco, and he has to kind of come to terms with the fact that he has this interior narrative where he is his father's son, and that makes him like a bastard in every sense of the word, right? And he realizes that narrative is incorrect. But he has to literally come face to face with his father to realize it wasn't him, it was his dad all along, right? And then Viola, she's like the daughter of a Roman Catholic Italian family, and she's magical, and that makes her wrong. And she likes girls, and that makes her wrong. And she's been taught that blood is thicker than water. And she truly believes that, and she wants to be close to her family. And there's a point in the third book where she has to make a choice between those stories that she's been told about what family is, and the people she's chosen as friends that become family. And she has to kind of break away from everything that she believed about herself, right? Because when you're brought up in a family where it's like family is the most important thing, and this is the narrative that you kind of get ingrained with, that's a really hard break to make. And both of those characters have to come face to face with it because they can't have their endings in the fourth book until they realize that those narratives that they had been telling themselves about themselves because they got them from their original families were just bull, right? They were wrong all along. So, yeah. So those were really like hard scenes to write for these books, especially Viola's.
Sure. I wasn't sure if you want to talk about Last Magician or Serpent's Curse. That's why I was squirrely about it. But you're right. I mean, it's such a theme in all the books. So Miranda, you can family is such a big piece of, and it's funny because I love how the TJ's brother and Mary's stepsister both they play important roles in how the story progresses, both in terms of plot and in terms of TJ and Mary sort of being able to understand what's right for them and what they're preventing themselves from doing or wanting. So I don't know if you want to speak to that or talk more about Mary and her mother's relationship.
No, I'll talk about the siblings. This is the first book I think I've published that didn't take place like in Tennessee, like as the main place. Like this, my characters go to Chicago, and Mary's from Tennessee, but TJ is from Wisconsin, and they're going to visit. She's going to visit her stepsister, and he's going to visit his brother, and they're all going to this concert. And it was kind of the first time I've ever had to write, where my main secondary characters were the siblings, and that was really interesting. And the relationships between Tyler and his brother and Mary and her stepsister there were a lot of tension between them. And especially I really enjoyed writing TJ. He idolized his brother. Oh, my dog just arrived. Sorry. He probably wants food. It was interesting writing TJ because he had always idolized his older brother. And, over the course of the weekend in the book, he realized a lot that he didn't like about his brother. But they end up having big fights during the book, but figuring out a whole lot about each other and end up growing closer because of it. And similar thing happens, with Mary and her stepsister Sierra. So it was really interesting and fun to write, the tension with siblings. I don't think I'd ever been able to dive really deep before, because I've always had characters who have big groups of friends around them in my other books, because they're taking place sort of in a contained place by where they live. So this book was very challenging for me in a lot of ways, but really fun too.
Yeah, I really enjoy it. Now that you've said that, I'm like, oh yeah, it usually is just a big group of friends, sort of in most of your past books, instead of really a lot of sibling. But they were both so present in this one, so that was really, it was great to see that dynamic. All right, well, we did a great job of discussing all these amazing topics in under an hour. No, we did not, but that's okay. Thank you all so much for being here. I can't tell you how it just makes me so happy to have you all here in a panel together, even if we're not physically in person. And I'm so grateful for you having come and supported NoVa Teen in past years, and for doing this sort of homecoming alumni party with us now. And thank you so much. I say this, I think, all the time, as a bookseller, it's so important, but especially right now, I think just thank you for writing books for teenagers that really are hopeful and are just, it's such a good, it's good to just be able to put that out in the world. And I'm really grateful to you all. I know it's hard to do art right now, especially, but so thank you all so much. And thank you for your time and for everything that you're doing. And thank you to your pets and your special guests who dipped into this. So I'm going to once again mention to everyone who maybe tuned in late, you can buy signed copies of their books from One More Page Books. I just made that scroll around the bottom, and I believe we've got the link is in the comments here. You can watch any of our other NoVa Teen panels. We'll be doing them at 6 o'clock Eastern, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday will be our pre-recorded keynote with Julie Murphy. So you can all watch those if you'd like. And if you're watching this later, congrats, you are in the future. I hope it's good. So yeah, thank you all again so much for being here. I hope we get to see each other in the store soon.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye.